See, there's mathematics everywhere.
I know.
You're telling me. Are we live? We can begin, I think. Yeah. Okay, a big little hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Big Little Book Chat. We are especially happy this year because Big Little Book Award turns 5, a milestone to celebrate. Parag had instituted this in 2016 with the aim of recognizing and honoring children's literature in regional languages. So we've covered Marathi, Bengali, Kannada, Hindi, and English last year, 2020. So different languages, different people, different geographies. It's been a rich journey so far. Today's topic is nonfiction for children. And very happy to introduce the 4 absolute gems we have on board with us today. Anchoring the session will be Tejasvi, our good friend Teju, a powerhouse reader and a torch-bearing librarian. On the panel, we have Devika Rangachari, the brilliant author, a writer of non-fiction and fiction for children. The outstanding illustrator, Priya Kurian. She's also a recipient of the Big Little Book Award 2019. And of course, Vidya. She is a book champion, as she loves to be called, and also a mix of colors from all that one and only funky rainbow we know. So welcome on board, and quite a constellation with us for the next 1 hour. The audience, I would like to request, y'all can put in your questions at the comment section. We've parked 15 to 20 minutes at the end of this 1 year to 1 hour. And the panelists will pick it up and we can have a conversation then. Okay, over to you, Teju. Thank you.
Thank you, Proma. And thank you, Devika, Vidya, and Priya for joining us today to discuss this, discuss nonfiction, because, you know, if you look at what children seem to be reading and we seem to be hearing of largely in conversations is fiction. We hear of stories, we hear of novels, we hear of Harry Potter, we hear of, what's the chap's name? There are these large series where lots of fun, lots of action happens, and kids get transported to different worlds and imaginary worlds, and they seem to provide a certain kind of pull, a quick draw into something that's not their world. So it seems like this is what children are excited about today. But nonfiction, as we know, is something that we are all part of here because we either create nonfiction or we enjoy nonfiction, or we all definitely enjoy nonfiction, but we create nonfiction in different ways by writing it, editing it, illustrating for it. So each of you have your own way of looking at it and approaching it. So while we kind of open this discussion, go over it, I thought I'd start by just kind of setting the context of what nonfiction might be and the scope of, in some sense, of what we are discussing today. So as we know, nonfiction as traditionally understood and typically understood in India, and that may be an interesting way of looking at it, is information. People tend to think of nonfiction as information that they can access in encyclopedias, in quiz books, and the like, right? So typically, nonfiction is attributed to say facts, and that's what seems to constitute that entire genre. And it seems to take different forms. Again, nonfiction as encyclopedia, as quiz book, as even textbooks are treated somewhat in the same category as these books, and that's a bit of a I find it a little sad that all of them get lumped together in that way. and that amorphous category becomes lost in in the understand in the fact that there is so much there that may not get read by children, or that may not be visible to children. So one of the points that we are also seeing today is that there is so much uh, bombardment, visibility of information generally as well, and in the form of news, in the form of video that we have as well. And there you add another layer of complexity by when you're presenting fact, and you're presenting fact through motion picture movies, and through documentaries, and through videos, YouTube, Facebook, and and the like. You have all of this out there, and in that are already tiny actually quite a range of books that we have, which we can discuss as nonfiction. A tiny visibility of that is also kind of easily lost. So in this kind of environment that we are in today, my first question is, what do you all think is the place of nonfiction in children's lives, and how do you, in your experience, what do you see it as a writer and a bookseller, Vidya? I would perhaps maybe start with you on this one, and then let's see, invite the other panelists also to share their views.
Thank you, Teju, and thank you to Parag for inviting us to have this discussion. It's always, lovely to be on a panel with people that you admire greatly in this space. And I have to say, I have complete admiration for for all three of you and the work that you've done in the Kidlit space. I mean, you have enriched it considerably by all your work. So absolutely a pleasure to be chatting with you. But, I do want to say that, this conventional image that we've had, or, people tend to have of nonfiction as some dry, dusty, boring old tome that is kept away, in the shelves at the back, only to be used as reference material. I think, nothing is further from the truth in this decade, at least, for children, when it comes to children's books in India. We have had some wonderful books of nonfiction that have come out. The thing is, they are bright, they are colorful, they are written with the same kind of passion that fiction writers invest in their stories. And, I have seen from, my own experience at Funky Rainbow that a lot of children gravitate towards nonfiction. In fact, I mean, yes, Harry Potter is a huge craze. Percy Jackson is a giant craze. The latest Ashok Rajagopalan book is met with much fanfare. But, I have found that children who are somewhat reluctant readers, who don't gravitate towards books naturally, we found that from our experience of being in different schools and being in different spaces as Funky Rainbow, those children tend to move towards nonfiction. I mean, they could have their favorite subjects. I mean, many kids love dinosaurs, they love space, they love genetics, and you find that they quite happily move towards that a little. I mean, feeling a bit relieved, I think, that they can connect with some books, maybe not be so confounded by it. And I think nonfiction is typically a great way to get reluctant readers reading. That's been our experience at Funky Rainbow. And, writers too, at the moment, have been creating excellent books of nonfiction. I mean, there are tons of books in the Indian context, and even more, of course, in the Western context, where they do use their imagination. They do use, an integrity towards, you need an integrity to research. You need to, make sure that you have stuff written, researched, and presented in a pretty exciting way for children. I think, I remember reading on some, piece where somebody said that if fiction is really a doorway to the world, then nonfiction is very much the window to the reality around you. And I really believe that books of nonfiction are very essential in, any child's reading catalog. I know you had said one thing about the internet and, of a lot of facts being available to you on the internet, to anyone on the internet. But I think the thing that distinguishes the internet from a real book is that the internet is just unidimensional. There is just one thing you can research, for instance, how many valves does your heart have of the internet, basically, or, is there Pluto in our, Milky Way at the moment or not in the Milky Way at the moment, really, right? You can research all of that, but a well-written, gripping, good book of nonfiction gives you so much more as a reader. And I really believe that, both when I was writing my book, as well as India A to Z, which is surprisingly going into a reprint, writers never expect such things to happen. And at Funky Rainbow, as when we, introduce books to children, I find that nonfiction does have a lot of takers.
Okay. So just to take one wonderful, idea that you used when describing nonfiction, windows to the world, right? Truly, if you want to look at reality, that seems to be one wonderful way of looking at nonfiction. Just like fiction can play very similar roles of windows and mirrors, right? So I wonder if we can take that and ask, if I can ask both you, Devika and Priya, taking turns to responding to this as writer and illustrator. How do you imagine creating windows for children to appreciate the world in looking at nonfiction, and why is it important to create those windows? As a history writer, Devika, where your preoccupation, your favorite nonfiction, favorite writing, in fact, is history, and as a trained historian yourself, you bring all of that to your writing as well. And how do you see this as in today's world? And then I would invite Priya for her response.
So actually, I think I became interested in history through a work of nonfiction, interestingly. When I was around 9 or 10, I read this work of nonfiction on Henry VIII of England. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it just lit a spark in my brain. And I remember making notes from that book. And then that led to a great interest in English history and so on and so forth. And then I ended up spending my life studying history. So and then writing about history. But the thing is that what I do remember about that work of nonfiction is not only was it really written in a very interesting manner, very gripping narrative style, but it also did not shy away from a lot of uncomfortable details about Henry VIII's very colorful life, a very colorful and controversial personal life. And I don't remember being very upset by the facts that I learned, and it was perfectly fine, and it was history, and it was, it's okay. So, which is a far cry from the kind of squeamish attitude that a lot of adults display towards works of fiction and nonfiction these days, assuming that their children will get mentally disturbed if they read anything that slightly, challenges their thinking. So, so I feel that if most parents had their way, their children's lives would be composed only of nonfiction, because we have all seen this in book fairs in the days when we used to have book fairs, parents steering their children away from fiction, stalls to places where you have adjuncts to your curriculum and saying, no, this is value for money, you buy this. So, of course, nonfiction has a very important part to play in a child's reading journey, and anybody's reading journey for that matter. The point is that there is nonfiction and there is nonfiction. I mean, there is of course the kind of inaccessible by nonfiction, historical nonfiction that I write as an adult for an academic audience, but I can't actually write that for a child. And my main view when I'm creating nonfiction for children, that is historical nonfiction, is basically two main factors: authenticity and readability. Because as you mentioned, children are anyway bombarded with nonfiction all the time. I mean, their textbooks are their biggest, main sort of manifestation of nonfiction in their lives that they have to stick with throughout. And a lot of them complain that history is one of the most dreaded subjects because they are dealing with their textbooks that are dry as dust. So there itself, you have nonfiction whose purpose has actually been defeated. Vidya has been talking about, wonderful works of nonfiction that can really engage the reader and pull you inside. So it's writing interesting nonfiction is really challenging. It's not something that you sit down to do because A, you are writing for a child, therefore you assume it's the easiest thing in the world to do, which is a trap that a lot of people fall into, and B, because it's nonfiction, so it is just getting facts from here, doing cut and paste job. Because there are wonderful works of nonfiction for children in the market. There are equally okay, I'm running the risk of controversy here, but there are a lot of books written by scamsters for children who are passing off cut and paste jobs as wonderful nonfiction. And because they are marketed well, because they have bright, attractive covers, parents and children too will make a beeline for them and consume those books, as if they're really wonderful, serious works. So I think we need to be a little careful about the way we both write, or we both develop and create works of nonfiction, as well as when we select works of nonfiction for our children to read or ourselves to read. So just keeping those eyes and ears open. And as Vidya mentioned, the net is not a source for any kind of information when you're writing nonfiction. It is something that I wish 99% of the people who write nonfiction would understand. But yeah, it can be used it's useful to give you a list of works that you could consult on that topic, or compiling book lists and so on. But no, it's not easy, and you won't get your information that way. There's no shortcut here. You have to go the classic old-fashioned route and actually sit and do your research. So research is I think the kind of keystone of any good work of nonfiction.
So thanks, Devika. I think again, it's a nice. I can use one idea that you brought up to segue to what Priya's can comment on this, because you mentioned that when you create a work of nonfiction and you're using this to kind of provide a window to the world outside, to kind of since you'll be talking about the past, to recreate the past in a way that is authentic, right? And the challenge there now for the illustrator also comes up, so that when you are illustrating, Priya, there's a huge, perhaps a huge range of books that you'll, if you are illustrating for nonfiction, because of the themes that are involved, right? You have done autobiography, you have done books which have historical imagery associated in it. So how do you manage to kind of bring up all of this, again, present it to and now perhaps we can talk about one angle of it, and then we can return to something else in later. But why would you think, why and how you, why do you do this, and why would you illustrate nonfiction?
Well, I mean, I myself, I think I used to read a bit of nonfiction, or whatever was nonfiction was available when I was a kid. So I think kids also have their own sort of preoccupations. So you'll always have a kid who loves bugs, who loves beetles, who loves dinosaurs, and that is what they, they have that one thing that they love, and they want to know all about it. So I think you started the conversation with why nonfiction, and I think there's always that kid who wants to learn everything about that one thing, and you need books for that, for those kids. When it comes to I think Devika and Vidya both covered the whole online debate. I agree with them. there's what you find on also the experience of reading something online is very different from a book. You know, online and you're reading, I think it demands a certain kind of, you know, active engagement with the book, while you can very easily, you know, very passively look at television or, you know, a video on YouTube and actually be thinking about something else. So that experience is sort of, I think, completely different. And you are also, you know, the editor of the way you are viewing a book.
Yeah, that's right.
So you engage with the book
It's a love.
completely differently. And so, as like Devika said, I think research, whenever I kind of work on a book which is nonfiction, I do my research properly. I think that is that's where it all starts. So if it's a historical figure, you kind of, you know, look at as many photographs as you can. If there are videos available, you know, do that. I like reading, so myself. So I read as much as possible about you know, the person, because you also apart from visual references, you also get a lot. There are lots of clues you get by through just knowing the person's story well. And I think and when you sort of also when I figure that we were speaking about nonfiction, I was wondering about what all constitutes nonfiction. So there are also like so many books about authors and illustrators have been working on, which deal with quite pretty difficult topics for kids. So, you know, things like depression and climate change. And again, these are these are books, these are topics that I think really cause anxiety among kids. And I would definitely categorize them in the nonfiction section. They might not be historical or, you know, but at the same time, where do you put them? So I think they have an important part uh, in the whole scheme of things as well. Books like that. So yeah, so I think just it is my interest in I think in the world and in what preoccupies kids, and that's why I think I want to create books, non-fiction books for them.
Thanks, Priya, because I think there are 2 points that came up, which was kind of nice to go ahead with, you know, which we had kind of even thought about in terms of going ahead with. One is, I think, to take on what Devika said, when you create nonfiction, you really want to think for children, you really want to think of authenticity and readability. And it's, and at the same time, now looking at perhaps what you know of, all of us know of as current attitudes towards nonfiction. How do we kind of keep this in mind? What is our approach to doing this, to bring in authenticity to our work? And why is that important? And not just that, here you look at a range of nonfiction. There are so many themes and so many topics that we talk about. And we look at writing for different age groups. There are some younger children who may not, where you approach writing and illustrating maybe slightly differently than what you would for an older child. So how would you kind of manage all of this while looking at readability and authenticity in creating nonfiction? And perhaps we can start again, continue with Priya, since you were already on that line. And then maybe we can go to Devika and then to Vidya. Yeah.
Me, Teju?
Yes, Priya.
Yeah, okay.
Because like for the illustration, authenticity is just as much important. And you started talking about, say, how you use images and read and prepare extensively. And I remember when you had done the Indira Gandhi book, and how you had to do it at a very short time, and you had very little time to do it. But the fact that Indira Gandhi was such a well-known figure helped as well. So
Yeah, so actually, the challenge again was both the fact that so much had been written about her was also a challenge, because how do you do something different? So I think the decision to kind of do like a part fiction, part non-fiction book came out of that, and also the decision to work on her story as in the comics format also sort of was a result of that. Um, I got the really lucky thing that I got to do was to travel, for this project. Seeing places where she sort of lived, grew up in person, I think that made a huge difference to the authenticity of the book, because I could see actually, details from her life, which I think I would have missed if I were just looking at photographs. And simple things like, how do you sort of how do you portray the grandeur of a place if you do not experience that space on your own. So I think that experience really mattered, because just because I was able to visit Motilal Nehru's house, I had a good idea of what the scale of that building is, what the luxury in which they actually spent their childhood. So those details were, I think, important. And I think that's for every book. The more you know about the person or the topic you're researching, it I think also the more detail you can sort of bring out in your work. So I think that curiosity to kind of unearth more and more details is important.
Thanks, Priya. And also, just quickly, if you can add quickly on how you approach illustrating nonfiction for different ages. Do you have, or for different subjects, for example, like a life cycle? If you were to illustrate a book on life cycle, how would it be different?
Yeah, I hope it won't be called the life cycle of
Yeah.
So
the story of the butterfly.
Yeah. Yeah. So so again, it might not just be about the butterfly. There are so many other things that go around that butterfly.
That's
so
right.
It's really setting a context, and understanding the context in which this uh, story is being told, and also keeping in mind what children are interested in now. Whether it Because it can't be dated. Your storytelling cannot be dated, and it has to be again, what are kids preoccupied with now? It has to kind of keep in mind that aspect as well. uh, so I and in some ways it's always nice to kind of I know a lot of us are introverted, and we find it difficult to interact with lots of kids, but I think that at some level it helps, just knowing some kids who are talkative and are willing to sort of talk with odd people like you.
Thanks, Priya. So, Devika, I think just to link this up to what perhaps you have in mind is, say, Priya just mentioned that, right, her illustration is contemporary, it needs to be that to be able to to kind of capture elements of the contemporary to be able to talk to the audience. And you, as a historian who talks about the past, right? And that's largely what you write on for children as well. How do you keep it contemporary and authentic, and make it readable when you write for different children, of various age groups, and just generally nonfiction?
It's a huge challenge. As you said, you put in so many things. It has to be this, that, and then you're talking about the past. I think that when you're entrusted with the work of nonfiction that you're supposed to create, you have an inherent responsibility there, because, you know, there is a certain respectability conferred on a work of nonfiction, because, you know, it doesn't raise controversial, or ideally should not raise controversial issues, you know, where fiction might venture into. Therefore, and it's got a close connection with school and the curriculum. So, you know, both, you know, the adults and the child are going to look at it with a certain like reverence. And so when, and in an ideal world, you should have been given the task of writing that work of nonfiction because you are a specialist in that field. So, you know, these are things that matter. So say if I'm writing a work of historical nonfiction, my responsibility is to be as accurate to the facts as possible, like that work of Henry VIII that I had read,
Yes.
that, you know, really ignited my interest, and just write what I know about a particular period, a particular person, a particular part of the past, in as unvarnished a manner as possible, but not in the way that that doesn't distinguish that book from the textbooks at all, because there is a sense of alienation that children always feel with it, particularly with the history textbooks, because I know when I start to do a session on history writing or anything to do with history with any group of children, 99% of the time, you know, there will be despair on their faces, and it'll be like, oh my God, now, you know,
collective growth,
getting into the most boring subject. And then when you probe a little, and then you look at the textbooks, you realize how little has changed over the years. So it's actually, as Priya, you said the word dated, it is actually dated, the kind of the way in which the facts are presented, the narrative style itself, it just puts off the reader from the very first sentence. I mean, at least a majority of textbooks, I've heard things are changing, I've heard that much is being done, but in my opinion, not much is being done also, because there is, and I'm going to specifically talk about gender here in the past, because that is something that I write about. So, you know, this is how irresponsible history textbooks can sometimes be. You know, taking a particular example, like a particular period in the past, say the Mauryan period, there will be details of what the men did, how they founded the kingdom, fought the battles, made the laws, and so on. And then there will be a little paragraph on women entitled Social and Cultural Conditions, where there'll be this gray, black and white photograph, faded photograph of jewelry they wore. Now, you don't even have to write any text along with that, because any child is capable of reading that subtext. It's the men that mattered, it's the women who are irrelevant. They just dress up and sit at home. So you are actually contributing to a gender blind understanding of the past. And I think in our earlier discussions, we were talking about the danger of having a single voice or a single perspective. So when you're setting out to write a work of particularly historical nonfiction, then you have that responsibility to incorporate different perspectives, even if they differ from your own, but to convey all of that in a sort of in an engrossing manner. And that I think comes with practice. And it's just because it's non-fiction doesn't mean there shouldn't be an element of creativity in it. So, and your creativity can come in different ways. It, you know, in the manner in which you write your prose, and how you choose to juxtapose your prose with different, you know, little interesting elements from the past. So this, as I said, this again comes with knowing that you shouldn't underestimate your audience simply because these are children you're writing for, because they are the most discerning audience actually, and you know, and are much more capable of pointing out flaws or finding a disenchantment in the particular book than adults are sometimes. So it's a fine line that you walk. In fact, I am even though I am a historian and you know, technically should be more at ease writing works of nonfiction, historical nonfiction for children, I actually find it easier to write fiction, historical fiction for children, simply because of this. There's so much that goes into a work of nonfiction that it's sometimes difficult to get the balance right between all these different elements that need to go in to constitute a good work of historical nonfiction.
Thanks, Devika. And we'll come back to that, that why you do that, and you know, in very soon now. But and I would like to take this some themes that we were talking about just now with Priya and Devika about you know, being contemporary and being authentic, right? And if we look at so Vidya, what do you see if you look at a survey of nonfiction? There is is the space kind of talking about contemporary society, challenges that we face. For example, in India, themes of caste, gender, other disparities, economic disparities, the rural-urban divide. Is nonfiction writing for children as well? Because Priya rightly pointed out how very difficult themes are also have to be part of nonfiction, like it is part of fiction. We need to talk about facts of climate change as much as you want to, create a story around it and present it. So, what do you see in your, survey of nonfiction and as part of Funky Rainbow? Is nonfiction being authentic to life around us?
I mean, it has, started to become, I can't say that, all the books of nonfiction that existed in the past, or, even let's say, in the span of the last 10 years may have fallen into that bracket of being somewhat dry and dusty and complementing the textbook, so to speak, which is, not the reason why children, need to go to it really, right? The thing is, though in the last 4 or 5 years there have been a lot of books of nonfiction that have come out that really do serve as windows to the real world around us, right? I mean, that people have picked themes like Priya pointed out, of the environment, of travel, of history, of course, and picking a whole, we do have books that bring out the social disparities of India. There are specific publishers who are working in this space, who write about marginalized people and people who actually make the community. I mean, they're all part of our community. They're all part of the real world. There's no reason why they should be marginalized. So yes, in a sense, the number of books and the number of themes that are getting covered are becoming, it is, increasing certainly. And an interesting thing that I can tell you from the experience of working on some awards, to put out to give out different kinds of awards. In those 3-4 years that I helped manage those awards, I found that the juries that were working with nonfiction were able to pick winners without much of, without too much, without hassling over whether it's a right book or not a right book. There was, kind of unanimous consensus that that book has been written quite well, the topic that it's been dealing with. And I think, like, one of the points that Devika raised, which I think is really relevant, that what we're looking for in our books of nonfiction is, I think it boils down to some 2-3 key elements, right? There's got to be a good focus. There has got to be vitality in the writing. I mean, you are addressing children. You want to whet their appetites for more, basically, or you want to fill in those little spaces in their heads that they want, where, all these facts, are buzzing around. And there's got to be an appeal. She made such a relevant point. You can't cull facts off the internet and write a good book of nonfiction, really, right? I mean, that's not what it takes to, and exactly what fiction writers do. I mean, you need to think of narrative, you need to think of plot, you need to think of pace, you need to think of writing. I mean, it's not just because you're writing a book of nonfiction, you can't just assume that, okay, I've got like some 100 fantastic researched facts at the moment, and there's my book, I can put it out in the next 2 weeks or whatever, right? It's not. There's a certain integrity needed to write nonfiction. And writers, I'm happy to say that in the Indian children's publishing context, there have been books, a lot of them in history primarily, but there's environment, there's travel, there's art. There's been lots of wonderful books that have come out on the lives of artists, and memoirs and biographies. Priya was telling us about Indira Gandhi. There's we're not reading some Mahatma Gandhi, father of the nation, and he was born in Porbandar and whatever, right? You're reading more exciting books that bring alive those personalities for us. We don't, tend to think of them as just old historical figures.
Yeah, that's right.
Certainly say that, there has been, leaps and bounds of improvement in the nonfiction writing space in the last decade.
Thanks, Vidya, about that. So, in fact, I think now we can go to another aspect that that's just been holding here, that Priya and Devika, both of you mentioned. So, Devika, if I can ask you this, you said you like to write about historical fiction, and we are also seeing today in children's writing, there's nonfiction doesn't tend to have the same form as it as we usually tend to imagine it to be. So, there's a lot of blurring. There's a lot of narrative element that comes into nonfiction, irrespective of what themes that we are talking of, topics that we talk about. And the children seem to relate to that much more easily. So what do you have to say about this, and this blurring of the lines between fiction and nonfiction? And
I'll just give you an instance from a few years ago when I had written this book called Queen of Ice, which is about a queen of Kashmir in the 10th century. Right. Historical fiction. But I remember going for this panel discussion somewhere where the moderator said, so when are you going to start writing historical fiction? And I said, but that is historical fiction. She said, no, what you've written is historical nonfiction. I said, no, that's not nonfiction. This is fiction. And then there was this entire kind of debate about what exactly have I written. And then I went off and started, trying to figure out things. And I asked my friends. And for some reason, she just insisted that was a work of historical nonfiction. Now, again, that just shows how easy it is for the lines to be blurred. Because as a historian, what I'm writing has a peculiar problem, which is that the further back in time you go, the less your sources are. So if I'm going to be writing anything for children on, a time which is very far back in the past, I'm going to lose my audience the minute I say, oh, this might have been the case, but we're not really sure. And then that might have been the case, but we're not really sure. And then we don't have evidence for this. And then, we're not sure about that. Now, then I might as well not write anything at all. So the point is that if I'm going to write something that engages their attention and which also imparts to them knowledge about some, interesting aspect of the past, then I have to blend fiction and nonfiction. Particularly the period that I write about, which is the early medieval period again. So there are some sources, inscriptions going, and some aren't there. And there's a lot of guesswork that goes on. There are huge gaps to be filled. And I'm definitely not going to write a book that takes the reader up to a point and says, okay, now you imagine what happens from here on, because, there's this big black and the sources. But there I can't be wildly imaginative as well in trying to fill those gaps. So I have to do some kind of intelligent guesswork and try and weave as accurate a story as I can. So this is where the blurring of fact and fiction come in. So I might be reconstructing a story out of, say, 2 sources or 2 inscriptions alone. So you just know that there is this book, Queen of Earth, which is historical fiction. I now know this is fiction. It's not fiction, but but there are only 2 inscriptions for this woman. So the whole thing is a complete blend of fact and fiction, because she existed. There are these inscriptions she issued. She belonged to a particular place. But then how did she get to that point? What did she do thereafter? What her character was all about, and so on. I am looking at certain pieces of evidence and trying to just kind of piece together a kind of jigsaw puzzle. So, it's difficult because you have to. I have children coming up to me and saying, so did this really happen? Because, you have mentioned it. And then you have to say, no, she might not have got up in the morning and had this particular conversation. That is part of my imagination. The battle she fought is real. So what I do to avoid that problem is, even when I'm writing fiction, I try not to invent too many characters, because I don't want to convey an irresponsible impression of the past to the reader, who might then assume somebody existed when they actually didn't. So, and I've also, and of course, it's easier when you're writing nonfiction, and you can just say that, okay, this is it, but, these facts don't exist for this part, and what do you think happened, and that kind of thing. You can engage the reader that way. But having said that, just because you can blur fact and fiction is not an excuse for you to bring in mythology and conflate that with history and say, we don't know anything, so now we can put in these elements as well and do that, because then that becomes a work of fantasy. That is something completely different.
Completely different,
yeah. So I think it's just a matter of knowing that what you're doing is something responsible. As Vidya said, you have to have that integrity. You have to remain true to the facts, but within that, you have to see how much you can blend. Is it, how much of what percentage of fiction can you add to nonfiction, or how much of nonfiction can you actually add to fiction? Because that is also there. All my writing is actually culled from my doctoral and postdoctoral research, but I cannot strangle my reader with facts. The temptation is always there that I studied this and I have to tell them this and so on and so forth. But it's, you have to just see how much you should remove from there. So which you remove from what? So that's the challenge.
Yeah. So Priya, I think I'd like to invite you to also add to this. When you write, when you illustrate, you see something similar. You always have to bring in, because your illustrator, your illustrations have to tell a parallel story.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think even when you're doing, I think you say, even when you're doing a story about a person who actually existed, you stay true to that person's personality. For example, I don't know if Indira Gandhi woke up and wore, a sari in that particular way, in a particular, on that day, or whether she was doing yoga with one leg on her. So I don't know whether she was doing that, but we know for a fact that she was a practitioner of yoga, and perhaps when she got the news that the nuclear tests had been done, it was in the morning, and it made for a good image that she would be, and her personality was cool and composed, so it would make for a good image that she's doing yoga while this nuclear blast is the news of the nuclear blast reaches her. So again, there is a certain amount of you have to dramatize it, make it interesting, yet it cannot be factually incorrect. And I mean, like, saris were such an important part of that whole persona of Indira Gandhi.
Exactly.
So you have to kind of, it made for good imagery. She's doing something in preparation for a big day. So as long as I think you're true to to that person's personality, and you're not misinforming the audience. I think a little bit of drama is
always good.
Very welcome. Yeah.
Vidya, any quick thoughts on this?
So
just goes to audience.
Before we move to the audience, I was just going to say, hearing both Priya and Devika speak, I mean, publishers and all of us are great at coming up with new names. So there are, the news genres are called creative nonfiction. It's called faction. I remember watching a session at Jaipur Lit Fest once, and an author said, "What I write is faction." I think this was Adrian Levy, and he was writing about the siege of the Taj. And he said everything that he had in the book was absolutely based on the siege of the Taj, but he has taken the liberty of making it appealing to an audience by adding pace, by adding, just writing style and stuff like that. So really blurry borders between these things, and it's good. I think, like, the borders of literature should be ever changing. I don't think they should be sort of demarcated in like very straight lines, really, right?
Exactly.
It's not that much fun, really.
Yeah, it isn't. Just like Raghu Karnad said that what he wrote was fictory, like fiction and history, when he wrote about his grandfather who actually was in the war, and anyway, so thank you, panelists, Vidya, thank you, Priya, thank you, Devika, for sharing your thoughts on how you write, create, sell, view nonfiction, and we'll just take some questions from the audience. There are several questions on recommendations for nonfiction, lists for nonfiction. Where do we look for resources in nonfiction? Here, I would park those questions for the end. Perhaps we can have a comment or two to share But there are a few other questions which perhaps you can give some more, like a more detailed response. So one question here, this is for, Deepa, from Deepa Agarwal. So Deepa asks, what do you have to say about the growing demand for non-fiction from publishers? They say fiction doesn't sell. Vidya, would you like to start with a response?
Everything requires selling. Nothing just sells on its own. Okay. And I'll say that wearing my independent, bookseller's hat, saying that everything needs pitching, everything needs selling, and publishers, if they want to just take the easier way out and say it's, nonfiction that's selling more than fiction, well, it's because they can probably tell schools, well, this is a great compliment to your curriculum and, this, that, and the other. But that's not really true. I mean, it is, in fact, you started the session saying that children love fiction and children like to read a lot more fiction. So my belief is that whatever it is, it's the job of the adult to identify what interests the child and provide that material in whatever manner the child wants it, wants to receive it.
Yeah, so I agree there, Vidya, because that's where, say, libraries play a major role. And here we have Mridula, Mridula Koshi has asked a question on this about developing a collection of Hindi nonfiction for young adults, especially. So, and she wants to know where we may actually source it, because this is one challenge, right? That in regional languages, someone else here down, Anand Patil, has asked, made a comment about, maybe some panelists could have been here from a regional language perspective. But I would like all of your responses as readers of nonfiction as well, not just as publishers and writers and editors and illustrators, but also as readers of nonfiction. What do you see? For children, do you see, as a librarian, I know that there is a disparity in publishing, for regional languages as opposed to what is available in English. But what do you have to say, and what should our approach be here as we go forward?
I think we need diverse creators of books also.
Very much.
So I think that's one place where we are kind of like when it comes to non-fiction, especially, I think I've found very few regional language books. I'm familiar with only sort of familiar with only 2 languages, but at the same time, I think Ektara in Bhopal, they do a lot of, they've been doing a couple of books, non-fiction books. In fact, I recently came across a script which was, which they would definitely be translating in Hindi. It was Philosophy for Children.
Wow.
In Hindi. So, so there are some people that are definitely, doing some great work in Hindi, in the Hindi language, which is the only other publishing space that I'm sort of familiar with. I'm sure there is DC Books in Kerala
yeah.
would be translating a lot of books, but their children's section is, I think it still needs some more intervention, perhaps.
Devika, Vidya?
Possibly translations, might hold
good quality ones.
Good quality translations that could sort of, we know that, many of Tulika's books are translated into various languages. There's, probably books of nonfiction like the Space and Earth and,
yes, that's right.
that whole and First Look at Science series, and there's a House that Sonabai built. But, Mridula has asked, saying, what about books for older kids, right? For young adults.
Exactly.
Basically. And we do know that there are pretty good books available in English. It should be possible to find ways to bring these out in other Indian languages as well, because readers, it doesn't matter what language they want to consume the content in, we should make it available and I possibly think that in all the regional languages, maybe the newspapers, the children's sections of newspapers maybe provide some writing, nonfiction writing. They're all typically designed around some theme. World Water Day is coming up, World Environment Day is coming up. Perhaps that's the kind of writing that's available in the regional languages. But yes,
there are some really good Hindi language magazines, again by the same organization.
Ektara, yes, Pluto and Cycle.
Ektara
I'm sure.
And by Eklavya.
Yeah, I'm sure Mridula is aware of those.
Yes,
but we are talking of, I think, for slightly older children, especially young adults. And I'm also, I don't know much about Hindi language publishing, but I'm not aware of much that is available. I'm sure there's a lot of research that has happened over there. Research that Mridula perhaps must have done, and she's really looking for it. And I think this is the story for all librarians. I struggle as well. If I have to look for Kannada, I don't find too much. And other than creating new content and good translations, energy is given to good translations. Perhaps we don't have a simple way forward yet. So there is one question here. Perhaps you can take this, Devika. So the question is about, again, Vidya addressed this partly, but it's there's one person who is linking it to history. Looking, how do we best make nonfiction books inclusive and bringing diverse perspectives based on topics related to various aspects of India? Arun G has asked, and Nitya Nagarajan has extended this and gave specific examples. And I said, are some of these themes actually covered when a nonfiction is written about Indian history, for example, untouchability, partition, famines, and
there's one logistical issue. The canvas of Indian history is so vast that if you were actually to sit down and start writing about every aspect of life, from every point of view, right from the old Stone Age right up to the present, it's a humongous task, and I don't think it's really been attempted other than in a sort of fleeting manner. So it's basically the people who write textbooks or people who write these works of nonfiction on history make a selection of the facts that they think are imperative for the child to know, or in order to keep the chronological sequence sort of coherent, and add a bit here and there. But then, as we all know, most of nonfiction for historical nonfiction is north-centric. There's very little about the South. There's very little about the East, about the West.
That's right.
It is male-centric. So again, as I had pointed out, and it is royal-centric, so that you will get to know very little about the the lives of the ordinary men and women. So there are lots of problems. It's of course the ideal push should be for a completely inclusive history where everybody finds representation, every part of life, every issue is actually given its proper airing. But I don't see it. I'm not aware of any work that actually has tried to encompass all these details in
like
one.
say, for example, just to support what you're saying, but there has been these series of books which have come of significant historical women, significant women in history, and from different times of history, and they say 50 well-known Indian
there's also a problem with that. The minute you say significant women in history, you're leaving out like the majority, the or whatever you want to feel that they are not important. But we don't know. We choose not to know. So
that's right. That's exactly. So that's wonderful that to get that perspective that it is challenging, and we have no simple way of doing it. But perhaps ideally this is how it should be, and maybe we can think as the growing corpus of work expands the stories that we have, we should look at a long-term project where we are more inclusive, we are more diverse, and we are more more accepting of everyone and the world the way it is. So I think we have many requests for lists. Perhaps what we can do is look at lists. Maybe I can request Parag. There is already the Parag honor list that is available for now, and so that is one place where you can look for the books from the year. So some of the best books that you have from the year. I know of a few other sources. One other source is if you go to this website of this library in Goa, Bookworm, they have a curated list of 100 books, which actually includes several nonfiction books as well on a diversity of themes. So you can go and look for that list on their website, and you can look for books. It's a well curated list. So that's another place where you can look. And I'm sure if you do a careful enough search, unless it is for India focused themes, which perhaps we don't have so many lists of this kind available, but contacting your librarian, contacting your bookstore like for Funky Rainbow and other children's bookstores, many of them are, at least I live in a city where we have two wonderful bookstores for children in Bangalore, Lightroom and Funky Rainbow. Contacting your children's bookstore and asking for recommendations. These perhaps are a good place to start for you. Contact your librarian, contact your friendly neighborhood children's bookseller, and they will give you recommendations. So there are many ways in which you can perhaps tackle that. So what we can do now is it's time for all of us to say goodbye. So thank you so much, Devika, Vidya, and Priya. It's been a pleasure speaking to you and all the wonderful insights that you had to share about how you approach nonfiction and and how you think about it and write about it and want to talk about it and how children engage with it and what you think is important in this field. So perhaps as an ending, each of you could share one book of nonfiction that you are reading, or a pile if you want to. Quickly do that because we really don't have much time, and then we wrap up the story after that.
So it's always hard to show one book. So I'm going to take your suggestion, Teju, and show a whole pile of books. But this has been a go-to favorite for many decades as of now.
Mm-hmm.
This is 103 Journeys, Voyages, Trips and Stuff by Siddhartha Sharma. It could be better formatted and designed. It could be, I think, Priya, maybe the publisher should be in touch with you, but it's a fantastic book of journeys, trips and voyages and travelers, and, perfect for dustbin minds like that want to know many and more things and about different travelers, different parts of the country. It's a book of nonfiction that we recommend very often. And just to add, I want to say that we do have a curated list of over
Wonderful.
200 nonfiction titles for children ages 1 to 18 in
Wonderful.
English, of course, and some in the other languages at Funky Rainbow, so people can be in touch with us through Parag Trust or directly for those lists.
Yes, exactly. You have a website as well where you can.
We do have a website as well with the nonfiction books classified.
Right. Thank you, Vidya. Devika, Priya, one of you.
Priya, do you want to go in?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed Rupa Pai's From Leeches to Slug Glue.
Slug Glue. Yeah.
Yeah. That one, and of course Anita Vacharjani's The Rebel with a Paintbrush. It's a biography of Amrita Shergill, and I love Kalyani Ganpati's work in it. She's sort of mixed both her style and of course there are images of Amrita Shergill's paintings in the book as well. Yeah, I think these two.
I think I would recommend, Doug Bill's series of books on, various topics like the environment, and I have a work of history in it. And then there's something about wild animals and the women pioneers and so on. So I think that should all be available with you, Vidya, at Funky Rainbow. So I think.
Thank you, Devika. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this.
Thank you, Teju, Devika, Vidya, and Priya. 1 hour was like, I don't know, less than 60 minutes, just a handful. So one takeaway for us, because so many interesting questions and ideas have come, especially from Anand Patil and Arun. So maybe we can try to put a list together for good nonfiction. There are lists on all your websites, but to have maybe a regional language component there is something, is a takeaway from this meeting. So yes, we can work on that and put it out for everyone. Okay, thank you very much. See you all again soon, sometime.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.